Hello all, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novari. Today, we are tackling Borderlands 1. Specifically, we're doing a bunch of side quests today. Let's be real, sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. But the batch of side quests we're going to be going for, we need to get some booze for Mr. Crazy Earl. We're going to be dealing with Jack's other eye. And we are going to be dealing with a couple minor things, including the middle of nowhere bounty boards, if I can get that far. So, in this area, we are officially in what I consider to be the mid-game. After beating Mad Mel, generally speaking, you unlock the area that would be called the Rust Commons. Now, the Rust Commons is actually the largest region in all of Borderlands 1. So large, in fact, that it is the only area that is split into an east and west variety. This is huge, because access to both halves is accessible as early as you can access both halves at the same time. But the lovely thing about Borderlands 1's I suppose, setup, is that you're kind of expected to do one and then the other, focusing in on I believe it's the east side. Don't quote me here, because I don't know which is which. I just know one's closer to the middle of nowhere, and the other one is closer to New Haven. But, anywho, with access to both halves, we really gain a huge amount of side quests all at once, which is great, because generally speaking, getting here, you're going to be about level 20, 22. By the time you beat the boss prior to the Salt Flats, oh geez, what's that one called? The Rack Hive? By the time you beat him, you're expected to be level 28, 29, which means in theory, we have a lot of room to grow, and side quests make that pattern of growth a lot easier than just beating up random spiders everywhere. And that's great for us, because it means I'm not going to be grinding for the next 6 hours straight. Instead, probably about 2 hours worth of side quests and lesser main quests, and off we go to the races. So, each area right now, we've kind of got 4 major tests or jobs to complete in this area. Jack's other eye is the one that I'm focusing on first, because technically, One-Eyed Jack is a mini-boss. Now, mini-bosses, as a general statement within Borderlands, generally are on the easier side. Most of them end up being rather quick one-off enemies, fight them back, and you're done. But One-Eyed Jack is actually really interesting as far as how fighting him works. One-Eyed Jack has a repeater pistol that has a similar shot style to TK's Wave, which makes it very difficult to avoid One-Eyed Jack's shots. However, due to the nature of One-Eyed Jack being a mini-boss and not a main one, he really doesn't last very long in combat against most of the playable characters. He's kind of there, but he's there as a experience buffer more than anything. So that's a great thing for us, as he's already down. Next, we gotta deal with Marcus's market correction, which is pretty well what you'd expect. We go in, we go deal with collecting we destroy some ammo caches, and that's it. Really, at this point, a lot of the missions are short, sweet, to the point. They make sense in context with prior missions and how they function as being part of a quest line, but they don't really have as much depth to them as some of the other games or some of the other missions might. So that's good, I guess, right? Now, with this being said, we're going to be finishing off pretty much everything there is to do in this region today, with the exception of a couple of minor side quests. So, hooray! So, one thing that I wanted to bring up about Borderlands as a game, as a franchise, actually has to do with what its gameplay loop means, or how it works for myself. See, I'm the type of person who always needs a goal in mind. When I played Minecraft, I always had this grand goal of building all of the Zelda dungeons in another video game just to spite Nintendo. I thought it was funny in some way, shape, or form, but I always have to have a goal. I always have to have something more to do. I can't just pick up a game and mess around. That's part of the reason why I do side quests and, shall we say, frequent extra playthroughs playing the game in ways that are perhaps unexpected. Beating a game like Borderlands, which is designed around guns galore, with the express intent of doing so without using bullets or ammunition of any variety, is somewhat ridiculous. I'm not gonna lie about that. I think it's funny trying to go through and do this in that way. But not many people would very much agree with me, because reality is, most games and gamers tend to have pretty solid ideas of what they like and what they don't in video games. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. But it also means that, for myself, playing games in unorthodox ways allows me to engage with what I enjoy and love in a way that I think breaks the mold and breaks convention on how these games are meant to be played, on what can and cannot be possible. And so, for me, I love Borderlands because A, it gives me a goal every time I pick it up. Whether it's farming Cromarax the Invincible, or attempting to beat a game without dying, or attempting to do so in a way that I personally deem unviable, is part of the charm, part of what makes me enjoy the game, part of why I want to continue to play it. And some people might disagree with me. And I won't lie, every single person out there has their own opinion on what should and should not be part of the game's overall appeal. But even the one that I think was poorly received when it arrived, the pre-sequel, I loved that game to death. Because to me, it was everything Borderlands 2 wanted to do, but it also introduced a more in-depth story for Handsome Jack. And while Handsome Jack is a character that I personally think is perhaps slightly could use more characterization, Handsome Jack was probably the epitome of a villain, because he always engaged with the player. He wasn't mysterious like some. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. And reality is, based on what you see in the pre-sequel, he knew exactly what was going to happen the entire time. But he has to play the part. He is, in his mind, the hero. But there's a very fine line between heroes and villains, especially in gaming. If you look at the Vault Hunters from Borderlands 1, one of the key points that tends to show up is the fact that your main character is the hero of the story. But are you? See, how do I want to word this? In Borderlands 1, you are a newcomer to Pandora. Among the 4 characters you can play, you have an ex-military, a hunter, you have a brawler, you have a siren, each with their own individual desire for why they came to Pandora in the beginning. But the thing is that what do you really get out of it? What are they actually aiming for? Well, for me, my point has always been on the fact that each of these characters have more to offer the world of Borderlands, a land of Pandora, than they do take away from it. So, in Borderlands 1, you're dealing with helping out around Firestone. You're taking down multiple enemy factions in the form of Nine Toes, Bonehead, Sledge's bodyguard. You're taking down Madnell, who has tyranny over the Dull Headland. You're taking down Crom. You're taking down even, what was his name? Baron Flint? Each of these individuals ends up being a huge entity and a huge problem within the world of Borderlands. The Badlands end up better off for you being an absolute menace to society because you're dealing with the other menaces to society. New Haven, Old Haven, and even Sanctuary benefit from the advent of the Vault Hunters' arrival, because it means that what once was a major concern can now be dealt with in a means that is safer, more reasonable for the average individual to survive without constantly worrying about bandit attacks. So you are the hero. But Handsome Jack does or attempts much the same, trying to end the plague, in his eyes, of the bandits of Pandora. Wants to see a successful growth of Pandora as a planet, while also, in many ways, shapes, and forms, attempts to take over the planet because he believes that the planet is better off in his hands. Do I agree? Not necessarily. But I can see and understand where he's getting his motive from. I can understand why he says what he does, why he is so afraid of putting himself out there and letting people close to him. And it's because, on multiple occasions, he has been hurt by the other main antagonists or main protagonists of the franchise. Whether he wants to admit it or not, whether we as players will admit it, the reason why he wears his mask is because he was hurt by none other than Lilith. Somebody who, in the pre-sequel, he trusted at least for a time. So, all in all, I think Jack makes more sense as a hero and a villain than most video game characters ever will. And I love that about Handsome Jack and Borderlands as a whole. But to say that certain characters are better villains than others, why? Well, I'm gonna poke my nose at another individual. The main antagonist of Borderlands 1, Commandant Steele. We know that Steele wants control over the Borderlands, or over Pandora as a whole. That much we get. We understand that because every time she shows up, it's always, I want the key to the vault, hand it in to Atlas, and turn yourselves in or face consequences. She's always been very adamant that you, the player, are supposed to be subservient to her. But she never actually engages with you in another light. Meanwhile, Mr. Handsome Jack has an entire mini side quest around throwing yourself off a cliff because, I'm frustrated by you Vault Hunters. I will pay you to throw yourself off a cliff. Just go jump off a cliff, have fun. And of course, you can either do it or chicken out. And if you do it, he's, yeah, I knew you would do it. That was so great. I enjoyed that because it proves to me that any amount that you'll do anything for money. And he walks away happy that you did what he said because he'd pay you. If you don't do it, he just calls you a chicken and walks away. And the thing is that In reality, is he wrong? I'd argue no. But I also argue that his perspective, his mentality on the circumstance, shows more about him as a character. Just because, why not? Anywho, we officially have Crazy Earl's alcohols, so we are going to kind of set up completing a bunch of side quests again, as we just finished every side quest prior to his main quest mission. So, yeah, hooray! I don't know why we need to necessarily spend half an hour or 20 minutes collecting alcohol from an area, but why not, right? C'est la vie. Anywho, he's hungry, and we need to get the next piece. But before that, we're gonna go hand in all of our missions. This is kind of one of the more important ones to cash in early on. Because when we go meet Pierce here... Okay, come on. Pierce has a side quest, Middle of Nowhere No More. Now, the Middle of Nowhere is another, shall we say, hub zone. It's a safe zone within the next section of the Rust Commons. Because it is a safe zone, we have access to more missions, more basically of everything. And it's going to be a much more reasonable to complete each mission over time. We also need to find Sean Stokely, or Stackley? Whichever version of that wording you would like to call it. Sean here is a missing person. We find him, and we get a new side mission. The side mission leads us to Crom's Canyon. Sean's cousin, son, somebody, is turned his life around and became a bandit leader by the name of Reaver. Reaver is, much like One-Eyed Jack, a side quest mission. He's not a main boss, he doesn't have that much for lead up to him, but he does, in fact, have a lot of banditos by his side. With Reaver focuses primarily on long-range weapons, specifically sniper rifles. In fact, you could say that most of the new areas focus in on long-range combat over short-range. I think that's great. I think that it's very reasonable that they want long-range over short-range, especially in Crom's Canyon. Now, Crom's Canyon is a weird area for Borderlands, and actually one of the better ones in my opinion. Reason being is because it is not built horizontally. It is built vertically, which is to say that you have multiple regions, both higher and lower than where you would originally expect to be. So there are typically 2 to 3 tracks or pathways to follow across Crom's Canyon, each with different lines of sight, each with different enemy types, and theoretically, you have access to every single one of these locations rather easily. But why? What's the point of it? Well, reality is, there really isn't much. Crom wants to protect himself and his region to the best of his ability. I think that's a fair statement to make. So having an entire canyon worth of banditos under his control means anybody and everybody can protect him and themselves as need be. And this is important. Each of the major bandit lords that we face off against have a bit of a problem where they are each in control of a separate section of the world. But each of them also have their own bandit clan following behind them at all times. This means, in theory, they are both the most dangerous and the safest entities in all of the Badlands. Sledge has the giant hammer and a ridiculously powerful shotgun. Bonehead had I think it was like a Bone Ripper or something, that was a SMG that shot 2 to 4 bullets at a time. You had Nine Toes with his Skags in the caverns. Each of these individuals had something more that made them more powerful. Crom has access to an incredibly long-range turret in a canyon with one way in, one way out. So, of course he is going to be one of the strongest entities, because if you turn on him, he's got distance, line of sight, and incredibly good long-range potential. Of course he'd be the strongest bandit in the region. So, that's kind of my point of view on it. Whether I agree, disagree, or whether you do is up to you. But that's kind of my take on each of the bandit lords and the main bosses of Borderlands 1. Reaver isn't much of a bandit lord. He is starting his own little bandit crew, but he doesn't have the notoriety or the weapons to be able to take down some of the bigger names out there. Reaver, if I'm being honest, wouldn't be able to beat Sledge or Mad Mel. And I think that's kind of the point. I think that they each end up with their own individual regions, simply because if they try to overextend themselves, they're going to have a bigger or harder... They're going to have a larger fight on their hand. The lesser lords, like Nine Toes and Bonehead, that work underneath another bandit lord, are also kind of, shall we say, subsidiary. They lead the charge, but they're more like commanders within a larger army. Which means, theoretically, as far as the bandits go, the biggest names are going to be Baron Flint and, ironically, Sledge, having the largest areas of influence. And I think that's kind of interesting overall, because the first major boss and the last major bandit boss are the two that have what I would consider to be the largest influence over the Badlands as a whole. Speaking of influence, I think I need to talk a little bit about Marcus. Now, Marcus Kincaid is somebody who has shown up throughout the entirety of Borderlands as a franchise. Generally, he's a gunsmith and weapons dealer. His statements are very closed-minded. He's always stating that he is capable of taking down various entities, that most of his merchandise was ripped from the hands of dead adventurers. And he's very frank about it. He's very upfront. He's very honest about where his merchandise comes from and what that means for you. And I think that's an important-ish point about the Borderlands, because weapons are in no short supply. I think that's a pretty clear statement when fighting most bosses leads to giant piles of loot left behind, where they're dropping endless stuff from, in the case of Borderlands 2, Iridium. You have major weapons, you have legendaries, you have money galore just dropped at random because, ooh, shinies. And that's kind of part of the looter-shooter genre as a whole. But what I want to point out is that these individuals are hoarding weapons. They have as many weapons, if not more, than most of the main cast of the game actually end up with. Cromorax, when he ends up falling and losing dozens upon dozens upon dozens of weapons, it shows, in part, just how dangerous the foe actually was. Because Cromorax don't use weapons. It doesn't fight like you or I would. It doesn't abide by the same rules that the player does. Instead, this entity is capable in many ways, shapes, and forms to be significantly stronger. It effectively eats or fights back against the various hunters, and what you get are just the contents of the last few Vault Hunters that fought against him and failed. That's ridiculous. And it's no wonder that he ends up being such a powerful entity. But the thing is, each and every boss technically falls under a very similar mentality. The more powerful the entity is, the more weapons, the more stuffs they have to drop. And if they have enough stuff to drop that you can effectively fill your inventory, that's suggesting just how many individuals, how many entities have fallen at the hands of the big bad evil guy that you're dealing with. Which is a lot. So, is it fair to say that these entities, this setup, is better? I don't know. But I do believe that part of the problem with the Badlands is also one of the major issues that I have with the world right now, which is that there are too many guns. That there is no such thing as safety in any real-world situation because guns are everywhere. And while I might personally say, oh, it's a problem, it's this, it's that, it can't be avoided in the Borderlands because, in this case, Marcus, while he is in a large control of the weapon distribution throughout Pandora, he is also being left out. He is being left aside and people are skipping the middleman, shall we say. I find it interesting that weaponry had become so paramount to the success of the various entities within Borderlands. See, when it comes down to it, most of the Borderlands world ends up being tied, or less, to their weapon manufacturing success. An example of this is entities like Torque, like Doe or Hyperion. Their success as businesses, in part, is driven by how likely they are to be able to beat the competition in more than just a figurative sense. Their capabilities are militaristic in nature, and it feeds back into the problem. Bandits get weapons how? By fighting back these militaristic operations. Militaristic operations want money, so they're going to sell to the bandits, who they, again, have to fight back. And you end up with this self-perpetuating cycle where everybody has guns. And everybody's trying to deal with the people that have guns because at the end of the day, nobody wants to deal with the fact that everybody has guns and they want to be safer. So everybody gets guns to protect themselves while also fighting those who shouldn't have gotten them to begin with. It's a very dangerous cycle to be in as far as humanity is concerned. Because what we deem safe and what others deem necessary usage are very different in terms of what I personally believe is reasonable. Safety would dictate that nobody has guns. But in that perspective, absolutely nobody would be safe from brick. So we're still ending up back where we started, where guns are a necessity in the Borderlands. Anywho, with all that being said, and with that guy's head now being, oh geez. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I'm gonna have to call it here for the day. And if you like what you see, drop a like, leave a subscribe, and I'll catch you next week. Until then, I hope you have a good one.